My name is Vanessa Proudman. I'm the director of Spark Europe. Wish you a good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. And Spark Europe is really thrilled to welcome you to this webinar on OA Diamond. It's the first in a series, and we're honored to be kicking this off today. So OA Diamond is so important to Spark Europe since it enables all authors to participate in OA in all disciplines and languages, and regardless of their financial resources, and it's scholar-led. That's what's key for us as well. And equity and diversity underpins the character of OA Diamond, and this is also one of our priorities. And whilst being equitable, the OA Diamond sector as a whole also has the potential to innovate the current academic publishing system if we work more together, which is why we're here today. And Spark Europe, we are a very proud partner of this project led by operas. You will hear a lot more about it this afternoon. I'm now pleased to introduce you to Agatha Walker. She's Spark Europe's communications officer. So she's turned the idea of the webinar into reality, and she'll be supporting the platform today. And I'd also like to thank Claire Redhead, who's the executive director of OASPA, for facilitating the discussion today. So without further ado, let me hand you over to Claire and let's get started. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa, and welcome everybody to this webinar today. As Vanessa said, I'm Claire Redhead. I'm Executive Director of OASPA, which is the Open Access Scholarly Publishing Association. And I'm pleased to be facilitating this webinar today. For OASPA, Diamond Open Access is a really important model. Diamond journals have always been an integral part of our membership community. I've been delighted to represent OASPA as part of this consortium undertaking this work, and it's been a real privilege to work alongside these other organisations as part of a team so passionate about this work. And the speakers you're going to hear from today have invested so much time into the study, and it's all credit to them and their detailed analysis that the report that we've ended up with is so valuable. So first of all, I'm just going to explain what we're going to cover in this session today. We're going to start with an introduction to the study and an explanation of how it came about. We're going to run a Zoom poll to get your thoughts on Diamond Open Access. And then we're going to have a series of presentations, and we will have some further polls along the way. So there'll be 5 sections covering the OA Diamond landscape, technical support, compliance, effectiveness, and then capacity building and sustainability. And for each section, we'll have a question and answer session after each one. And then at the end, Vanessa will talk about how we're going to move things forward and the overall vision. So, first of all, it's my pleasure to introduce Johan Roerik. Johan is Executive Director of Coalition S and Editor-in-Chief of the FAIR Open Access journal Glossa, a journal of general linguistics. And he's going to talk about the motivations behind Coalition S commissioning the study. Johan, it's over to you.
Thank you, Claire. As you know, Coalition S and Plan S put forward an integrated set of policies to achieve immediate and full open access. And by that, we mean full, immediate and full open access of every color. This is actually enshrined in Principle 5 of Plan S, namely that states that the funders support the diversity of business models for open access journals and platforms. And in that context, a little over a year ago, we launched a tender, Coalition S, in collaboration with Science Europe, launched a tender on 27 March 2020, in fact, for a study on diamond journals and platforms to provide us with an analysis of the global landscape of diamond journals and platforms, to chart their variety, scope, the disciplines they serve, and the regions in which this model is prevalent. Also to see which the current mechanisms are of funding, because there's very little is known of that. We know that it is very often public funding, but how that works, we don't know. and to provide us also with an overview of the technical and financial challenges that these journals might experience. I mean, as an editor of a journal myself, I know these challenges of a journal that has to provide in its own that it falls under the Open Library of Humanities. I know the challenges in that regard myself. So we asked in that tender to provide us also with an action plan and recommendations for principles and funding mechanisms, because one of the problems also for funders is that diamond journals rarely rely on per unit payments, so the dreaded APC that people so dislike, rightly so, I believe. But that makes it a little bit difficult for funders to contribute funding, because for funders, an APC is actually a very easy mechanism to contribute funding to open access. So how do you make those two meet? How do you, on the one hand, meet the needs of Diamond Open Access Publishing that does not want to charge authors or directly, or even funders directly, and how on the other hand do you meet the funders requirement to make to get a funding mechanism that is convenient and accessible, that helps Diamond Open Access Publishing. So the question that we had was, how can Plan S support Diamond Publishing? And in June 2020 we awarded the tender to a consortium led by Operas to carry out a study, which is now available and has come out a few weeks ago and has been open for study. It's become a very important and large study, first of its kind, I believe, showing bringing to light a somewhat invisible archipelago of hundreds, thousands actually, of journals. So some estimates go to about 30,000 journals, representing about 8 to 9% of yearly publications. That is a lot, if you think about it. Of course, there are various technical and financial challenges over those various journals, and these are what we need to tackle. What we need to do, I believe, as a result of this study, we've realized much better as a community, not just as Coalition S, but you and I, editors, authors, funders, realize much better that we have to make Diamond Publishing more visible, and that certainly we have to make it more technically and financially sustainable. Only in this way can we create a solid platform that allows academic publishing to be driven and owned by scholars, by communities of researchers. And this hopefully making Diamond Publishing stronger internationally would also help research communities to switch models to more easily, to switch, for instance, from subscription model to gold or diamond, or gold open access to a diamond open access model. We know the recommendations that have been formulated: set up a funding plan in 1 year and create a capacity center. And that is something that we will now take forward in a task and finish group within Coalition S to see how we can do this. And with this, I would like to stop the introduction and hand the floor to the next speaker. Thank you very much.
So next, thank you, Johan. Next, we're going to hear from Pierre Mounier. Pierre has been our fearless leader of the consortium. Pierre is Community Coordinator at Opera, Associate Director of Open Edition, and Co-Director of the Directory of Open Access Books, and is going to talk about the work that we've done. Thanks, Pierre.
Thank you very much, Claire. To start this presentation, I'd like to share with you some slides to present to you the study itself, and more particularly the methodology on which we used to carry on this study. So I share now my screen, and I hope everyone sees or is going to see. Yes, the slide. Okay. So just in a few minutes, I won't talk long, but just in a few minutes, I just want to present to you first the consortium of the 10 organizations who participated in this study, and also the 10 persons from those organizations who made the study group and worked together during a little bit more than a year now, I think, meeting each week, each Friday afternoon, actually, and discussing and working together to achieve this study. I want to read the names of the persons or of the organizations. You can see that. I just want to say that from my perspective, what is very interesting in this consortium is that it's a diverse consortium, because we have different types of organization, people coming from like research or university libraries, researchers from universities, membership organizations representing libraries or representing publishers, research infrastructures, service providers, and other types of organizations coming from different countries, different cultural backgrounds, or focused on different types of discipline. And I think it was what achieved the richness of this group, and it allowed us also, I think, to consider the diversity of the landscape we were studying, because we had this diverse background as a group to rely on. And I'd like, of course, to thank very much Science Europe and Coalition S, who funded this study. I just want to remind you, I think that most of you already know that, but just in case, that all the outputs of this study are published on Zenodo in different parts. So the two main parts or the two main outputs of the study are the two reports, the one presenting the findings and the other one presenting the recommendations. We were keen on separating the two different parts, the findings from the study on one side and our recommendations as a group on the other side. But that's not all. If you look well, and I encourage you to have a close look at the presentation in Zenodo of our outputs, you'll see that we have also released the survey dataset and other type of materials. So there are 5 types in total that we hand over and that we share with the community, so that the community can continue working also from the outputs of our study. Just 1 minute to remind you, of course, it has been extensively presented in the reports, but just to tell you that our study approach is based on, let's say, 3 types of sources. First, or 3 approaches. First, there has been a thorough database analysis, more particularly analyzing data coming from the Directory of Open Access Journal, the ROAD database, and the World Crawford GOA dataset of open access journals. So this is really the bibliographical database analysis on one side. On the other side, probably most of you have seen, and you remember that we have launched during the summer an online survey to ask many questions. Some people told us that there were too many questions, but we were keen on trying to collect as much information as possible from the respondents, the journals we were surveying. So we asked a lot of questions, and we got, I think, a good number of answers. So 1,619 valid answers, answering most of the questions. We were really pleased to have this kind of result, because it provided us with a good data set that we could analyze thoroughly. And as a follow-up from this online survey, we organized 3 focus groups with invited journals and 10 interviews with hosting and dissemination platforms serving the needs of the Diamond journals, to have a mix between quantitative and qualitative analysis that led to the writing and the publication of the report and of our analysis. So here's you have a more detailed structuration of the outputs of this study. So on one side, I said the presentation of the findings, which are that you can break into 4 parts: the landscape analysis, and analysis of the compliance of Diamond journals against Plan S criteria, technical requirements criteria, an analysis of the dynamics of the sector, and an analysis about the sustainability of diamond journals. And on the other side, we have our recommendations. And you remember probably that we have tried to sum up all our recommendations into this kind of table. But of course, there will be more detail about those recommendations, and we are going to talk about it more in detail, as well as the findings in the afternoon. So that's all for me for this very general presentation. And now I'd like to hand over to Agatha, who is going to tell you more about the follow-up. Agatha, I don't remember already. Do I continue sharing, or do you share your own screen?
It would be great if you could continue sharing, but I'm not entirely sure if my slide is the next one. If not, it's the second one in the, so you have to go back.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, but that would be absolutely fantastic. Oh,
this one,
okay.
Right?
Yes, perfect. Thank you, Pierre. So good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. I will make sure that this webinar runs smoothly today, and I will be in charge of running our Zoom polls. So as Claire mentioned, we will have Zoom polls throughout the session. If you're not familiar with the Zoom polling, pretty much once I launch it, there will be a window popping up on your screen, and then you have to choose your answer. And other than that, also while our speakers present, you are more than welcome, and you're encouraged to actually put your questions that you would like them to answer, but please do put them in the Q&A section of Zoom, not in our chat window, but the Q&A window. It's very important because we will be keeping track on all the questions that come our way in this particular window. And you are also able to upvote questions that you like most to be answered by our speakers by giving them a thumbs up. And then I imagine that we might have a lot of these questions, so we will probably just choose the ones which are the most liked to be asked, actually. And without further ado, I would actually like to start with our first Zoom poll, which is to show us pretty much what is your relation to diamond journals. So I am launching it right now, and I will let it go on for a minute or so. Please do vote so that we understand where you're coming from. It's very exciting to see how everything changes there. So the question is, what is your or your organization's relation to diamond journals? The possible answers are: my organization owns a diamond journal, I'm editor or manager of a diamond journal, I published in a diamond journal, my organization provides services to what happened here, I don't know, and then other or none of the above. Okay. I will run it for another 10 seconds and then we'll end it. And there we go. And I am sharing my results with you. So Claire, I guess that you can see the results if you would like to comment on them and just take them as pretty much a segue to the part where we will actually now hear the presentations.
Yeah, so we have quite an even split of, so we've got 22% of the attendees' organisations own a diamond journal, 22% are editor or manager of a diamond journal, 10% have published in a diamond journal, and the highest percentage is my organisation provides services to diamond journals, so that's 30%. And then 22% other, and 24% none of the above. So the majority of the people here have a connection with diamond journals, either owning, editing, managing, publishing in, or providing service to. And obviously some overlap there because you can pick more than one. Thanks, Agatha. So with that, we'll start with the presentations. So first of all, we're going to have a presentation from Bianca Kramer and Jeroen Bosman, who are both scholarly communications librarians at Utrecht University Library, and they're going to talk about the OA diamond landscape in general. over to you. Jeroen, you're on mute if you're going first.
Thank you, Claire. So indeed, we would like to start off with giving you an overview of the OA diamond landscape. And we'll just jump in right away and giving you really the main takeaways. So in summary, what we have found is that there is really a wide archipelago of relatively small journals serving various diverse communities. And we found that open access diamond journals are really very numerous, perhaps up to 29,000. And they are in relatively decline. Looking at article numbers, that is a recent development. They are concentrated, but in humanities and social sciences, but they are still very numerous in science and medicine as well. We found that they are strong in Latin America and Eastern Europe, and that they are mostly quite small and with small publishers. And we also found that often these journals are written nationally, so with authors from the same country as where the journal is based, but really read internationally. We also found that up to half or 44% of the articles in full OA journals are in diamond journals. And what is interesting also is that we found that they are frequently very strong, also relatively compared to APC-based journals in supporting multilingualism. And finally, it is interesting that we found that most diamond journals have been diamond right from the start, so right from when they became an online journal. So we'll dive a little bit deeper into some of these aspects. And the first is, I hope this works. Yes. So the first is that you might wonder where the number of journals comes from. So of course you might be familiar with the directory of open access journals that lists journals, but there is also a much bigger directory, which is the Road directory, which is maintained by the ISSN registry in Paris, which is more inclusive, but not as DOJ. It's not strictly vetted. So we sort of combined these. Well, actually, that was done for us by researchers in Germany. And we found that there is, of course, quite a strong overlap. And for the directory of open access journals, we know because that is registered there, we know which part is diamond, so that's 70%. From the part that is uniquely in Road, we don't know that. So we did a sample check and we found that between 24 and 65% is diamond. And in total, that leads us to the estimation of the number of journals being somewhere between 17,000 and 29,000. And you might wonder where that difference comes from. So the low number, it has to do with that sample check. The low number in the sample check is those journals that really explicitly stated that they are diamond or that they are not charging APCs. And the high number also includes all journals that just simply don't state an APC, but that do not explicitly say that they are diamond. So there is yes, really a gap between those, but there might even be up to 29,000 journals. And it's not so strange to reckon, indeed, count that there are maybe indeed 65% diamond journals in that Road part, because it's more or less comparable to what we find in the directory of open access journals. So we also found that recently, in terms of number of articles, there is somewhat of a leveling off of the growth of articles in diamond open access journals. And that is perhaps worrying because the growth in APC-based open access journals, so in terms of number of articles, is still going up. If we look at where these journals come from, we can compare the diamond open access journals with APC-based journals. So this is directory of open access journals DOJ data. So diamond is on the left in this visualization, and you can see that compared to APC-based journals, that they are much more concentrated also, or very important in Latin America, where you find relatively few APC-based journals. So that is really a big difference. And also within Europe, we find that diamond journals are much more coming from Eastern Europe, and not some and really less from Western Europe compared with APC-based journals. If you look at which disciplines these journals are in, again, comparing on the left Diamond with APC-based on the right, you see that Diamond journals really are much more concentrated in humanities and social science, although, as said, still substantial also in science and medicine. But really, compared to APC-based journals, we see that Diamond journals are really very important in humanities and social sciences.
Yes, and I'll take over from here. If we look at the type of publishers of Diamond journals, again on the left Diamond journals and on the right APC-based journals in the DOIJ, we see that the majority of Diamond journals is published by universities, including university presses here. While for APC-based journals, traditional and full array publishers play a much larger role. And on the next slide, we see a similar picture from our survey data when we asked about ownership of journals. The categories here are a little bit different, but again, the most prevalent model is journals owned by universities. Looking at the size of journals, we see that Diamond journals are concentrated much more in the small or medium-sized brackets, between 10 and 50 articles per year, whereas APC-based journals on the right are relatively well spread across all size categories, only with relatively very few really small journals. So that's about size of journals. How about size of publishers? What stands out here is that for Diamond journals, a lot of journals are with small publishers that have only 1 or less than 5 journals. Most of these data so far were from DOIJ, but from our survey, we also got some additional data, some additional information that could not be gotten from DOIJ. And one of them is about where authors and readers of Diamond journals come from. And if you look at on the left, you see that the proportion of authors from the same country as the journal is quite high, especially for journals from Latin America and the Middle East. But also overall, the majority of journals find that over 50% of their authors come from the same country as the journal. So many Diamond journals are nationally oriented in terms of authorship. But if you look at readership on the right, really much more than 50% of readers are coming from outside the country. So readership is oriented much more internationally. There are some strong differences here. For instance, Latin America, where readership is strong inside the country, and Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, where readership is mostly coming from outside the journal's country. And finally, for this part, if you look at the development of journals over time by their size, you see that especially the larger journals, over 75% of journals are either constant or increasing in size. And for smaller journals, the proportion that's either increasing or constant in size is around half of journals, which says something about stability of Diamond journals. And this is where we would like to end this brief overview of the Diamond journal landscape and open the floor for questions and discussion on this part.
Thank you, Bianca and Jeroen. So there are some questions have been answered in the question and answer box as we've gone along. So do have a look there as well. If you're in the audience, there's some answers there that you might want to look at. There's a question here, do all Diamond journals carry a CC BY license, or are other Creative Commons licenses such as CC BY NC and CC BY Ncnd part of the publication program of Diamond journals?
Yeah, for that, I'm going to refer to Jan-Erik's part that we'll get to in a moment, okay. So that the question will be answered, but in a little bit.
Perfect. And the next question really that I could see, this is for Johan. So Johan, you need to turn your microphone on, and I just need to scroll down a little. This is being a bit slow.
Yeah, I've been answering in the chat, in the Q&A. Yeah. Actually.
So can you see the question from Christian Classon?
Oh, no, not
that. Maybe that's, I can't see it because it's already been answered. Hold on.
Let me see.
I can read it out if you want me to. Shall I read it out? You can't see it?
Yeah.
Yes, I How does Coalition S have any thoughts on how to better support Diamond OA journals doing startup? Yes, so my answer was that Coalition S will investigate how it can implement the recommendations of the study, namely most notably in setting up a capacity center. That is definitely something that we would like to look into, how to do that exactly. And that capacity center, one of the tasks of the capacity center, of course, would have to be to bring these journals up to technical specifications that would be in line with, for instance, DOAJ, so that all these journals correspond to the same technical requirements. That would certainly be important for funders to be able to subsequently then contribute money to the functioning of those journals. These are my first thoughts about this for now.
Thanks, Johan. So going back to Bianca and Jeroen, there's a question here. This is something I've seen debated a lot on Twitter over the past couple of days. Why do we feel the need to label things as diamond, green, gold? These terms cause confusion and widely interpreted. Can't we dispense with them and just say what it is? Just interested really on your own perspectives on this, if you're able to share.
Yes, sure. Of course, sometimes these labels might be confusing, especially because we tend to see more and more labels, because you might even have bronze or even black, and people don't always know what they are about. But on the other hand, that triggers also discussions that are valuable. Of course, it is always good in these discussions to really make clear what you are talking about. So for Diamond, of course, it is clear that the main characteristic there is that they are non-APC. So if you would like to use the word non-APC journals, then that is fine with me. But we are, of course, really comparing different models. Also, this is also important in financial terms and also in political terms. And in that sense, it is good to really compare that with, for instance, green open access, or and there is really the question on whether diamond is really a separate category from gold. I think it is not. It is really a subset from gold open access journals. So where gold open access journals are those journals that are made open by the publisher, mostly on their own publisher platform, and diamond open access journals are doing the same, but doing that without charging APCs.
Thanks, Jeroen. Bianca, did you want to add anything?
Maybe just in general, and that's also very much my own opinion, that we have these labels, we have had these classifications, and yes, there are, it's really multidimensional and it's ambiguous, but it also enables us to, it forces us to be precise in what we mean. In discussing this, it forces us, okay, when we say gold, what do we mean by gold? And then becomes apparent when we mean something different by that. And that in that way, I think the labels also open up the possibility to discuss and really be precise in what we mean.
Yeah, thank you. So the question here, can you say anything about how selective the diamond journals are on a scale from mega journal through to highly selective?
Oh, that's a nice question. We didn't look at that. We didn't ask that in the survey, for instance. I think what we can see is if many smaller journals that are really niche journals that are serving a very specific disciplinary community, I would expect them not to serve as mega journals, but the level of selectivity and the acceptance rate, for instance, we did not ask specifically about that.
Thank you. There's a question here. A large size of diamond open access journals are funded by universities. Does that include university libraries, and is that geographically uniform? So I think that's a large number of diamond journals are funded by universities.
Jeroen, do you want to take that one? Or?
Yes, I think this is a little bit of a problem of being really in the beginning of the webinar, because I think that Vanessa at the end of the webinar will dive into financial support for diamond journals. So I don't want to really in indeed go into that right now, because she really will explain in detail what kind of funding there already is available, because we did ask that in our survey.
Thank you. I think I'm going to stop there with the questions for now. We're already running a little behind on our schedule. So the next presentation is by Pierre-Carl Langlais, a researcher in media studies and digital humanities at Université Montpellier and a research assistant at Opera. And Pierre-Carl is going to talk about technical support. The floor is yours.
Okay, thanks a lot. I'm going to share the screen. Okay, it's okay for everyone?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, thanks a lot. So now I'm going to talk about technical support. So, so what we have seen in the report is that there is a mix of scientific strength and operational challenges. So once again, as in the precedent presentation, I'm going to go very quickly there. So basically what we have is both consistent strengths and challenges. So there is a lack of layer ownership documents, which we have seen in the previous presentation, lack of capacity for monitoring or reporting, of a need to professionalize peer review processes, lack of using some important tools like anti-plagiarism software, and big issue with indexation. So I'm going to cover some of this, not everything, but most striking points. So the very big thing, really important to think about when you think about diamond models, and to think about the fact that diamond may not simply be about the fact it's non-commercial, but there may be more commonality across the journals, is the fact they have experimented a wide range of open source revolution, because nowadays open journal system is the leading structure used in the surveys, so by 60% of the respondents. And there is also other alternatives which include Lodel, Genway, and DSpace. So basically, it seems that actually a large plurality of the diamond journals tends to use academic CMS, and most of them use open journal system. So it has contributed to create some kind of a common technical culture across the journals, which is something new, because originally the field is highly divided, but for the first time, it seems to have some kind of communality. It also contributed to democratize standardized technical tools and infrastructure. So AIOC visualization, actually, there is no impact of the use of an academic CMS of another system on the size of the journal. So basically, even very small journals tend to use this type of standardized tool. So otherwise, there remains a very high diversity. So we talk about an ecosystem, but actually there is a lot of different species across this ecosystem. So here what you see is basically a correspondence analysis, merging different factors from the surveys. The most important one are definitely the legal status, so whether they are owned by a land society, a publisher, or university, or if they are entirely voluntary run. So basically, it creates a lot of diversity, which also is supplemented by diversity across disciplines and diversity across nationalities. But what we can see basically is that not all actors are actually equal. Some of them can benefit from the advanced feature of standardized CMS, while others, they may lack resources, they may lack support, especially they may be stuck in older version of their tools. And so it can affect the way they are going to be able to interact with standardized tools. So here you got just a quick visualization of the relationship between ownership and researchship, and so resources. And so we see that, for instance, the journal hosted by universities, they rely a lot on income support from an institution, whereas from land societies, they may have more diverse resources, especially from memberships. It's not entirely surprising, but definitely it's, when you talk about diamond journal, you talk about a lot of very different profiles and way to run the journals. So now I come to the biggest issue. So one of the biggest so far, which has also resonated a lot in the focus groups we have made, is the lack of preservation solution. Because there is a big issue with the fact that traditionally preservations, they have been fought by libraries because they don't want to lose their own collections, they have been paid. But with diamond journals, there is no such issue. There is much less incentives to actually save them. So there is a big issue within the survey, 57% of the respondents that to the best of their knowledge, they have no preservation policy in place. So this put a large share of our diamond journal at risk. There have been a study, a recent one, which showed that some of them have actually disappeared. So definitely there is a lot of work to be done to ensure that there is no loss in this area. So other things we have seen also is that even though standardized CMLs are now really part of the picture, not all the use are entirely equal, because some journals lack either the time or either the skills to take full advantages of them. So the main challenges that were linked to the use of smart academic CMLs are training, definitely, and support, lack of support, especially to do the update or to do the management of the version. And other important thing that we see that a lot of journals, while they have apparently very good tools to streamline their evaluation, usually they can fall back on more artisanal methods, like for instance, running peer review on email or running peer review on the spreadsheet, simply because these tools are better well known by the voluntary contributors to the journal, or it's difficult to set up a system where you are doing the thing entirely voluntarily. Indexation is a very, very big challenge. So it's the most important challenge we have seen across the survey. It's normal because it's really the part where there is a big clash between the more artisanal way of working of a lot of diamond journals and suddenly the requirements, not only in terms of standardization, but in terms of simply times to fill up the survey, because a lot of journals are not being able to fill very large survey or to correspond with the standard index and so on. So what we have seen is that basically as much as 400 journals are not even including in the DOAG. And so now we come to the area of expected support. A lot of them are for tools and services or for structural funding. So basically, there is a lot of demands to be able to free up some time to actually being able to have the journal being set up and being able to run. What we have seen also is that there is a kind of mixed feeling also about standardization across, because a lot of journals, they're also interested in diamond journals to set up things differently, to try different things. So we have seen also in the analysis, in the focus group, that there is a lot of hidden innovation in diamond journals. They set up different way of governance structure, different way of do evaluation, and it's being made possible simply because they don't have the same constraints to standardize as other journals. So finally, I'm going to conclude. Another important development is the development of platforms. So if I come back to the correspondence analysis I've shown you at the start, what we see is that platforms, they are right in the middle, because basically there is a good way to support very diverse kind of profiles of non-commercial journals. And while bringing forward common standard and norms at a limited cost, because a lot of the cost is simply shared across, especially regarding the updating and management of the software. Definitely, there's a lot of potential saving here. So definitely, it's an important development, but still limited by the fact that platforms, they have also limited funds, and usually they have some criterion to join. So definitely, I think there is a lot of stakes to overcome the cost of entry. So here I'm just going to put back the recommendation. So definitely there is a need to better coordinate editorial and quality insurance service provision. So especially with setting up tools, for instance, for anti-plagiarism software, to better identify the voluntary work being done in the journals, because currently there is no standardized data to record that. To formalize legal ownership of governance rules, and to increase infrastructure capacity to support the biodiversity, because it's a strong demand for the journals. It's also to be able to have both support, but also a way to be able to make lives at different profiles. I'm going to end up here.
Thank you, Pierre-Carl. We have a question. Can you speak about how the technical support of diamond journals differs from other open access or non-open access journals?
Well, the big issue is that there is lack of time. It's always the thing that comes back. The people that want they do it a lot of the case, they do it voluntarily. There is, of course, different profiles. So some of them, they can have some in-kind resources. They can have, there's a lot of differences, but basically, this is the time. So basically, and also perhaps the lack of training. So in a lot of cases, the people, they do it on their free time, and so they lack the ability to, for instance, update the software or run some kind of things which are more complicated.
Thank you. It's fabulous that you've all been submitting so many questions. This is exactly what we wanted today, but it's getting quite hard to keep track of these. And so what we've decided is that the next 3 presentations will just go back to back, and then we'll have a question and answer session at the end of that where we can share the questions out among the presentations. So with that, next we have Jan-Erik Fransvag, who is academic librarian at UiT, the Arctic University of Norway in Tromsø, who is going to talk about compliance. Thank you, Jan-Erik.
Thank you, Claire. I'll see if I manage to share my screen here. Does that work for you? I see Johan is nodding. Okay, I will start with the main takeaways to make this presentation short. The conclusion is that the diamond journals are on the road to full compliance with Plan S. But if you look closer, of the OA diamond journals, only 37 comply with over half of the criteria, and only 4.3% comply with all criteria. Compliance is overall lower for OA diamond than for APC-based journals, and biggest journals seem to have better compliance. Some 37% of diamond journals use a CC BY license, some 44% embed machine-readable licenses, some 20% use a standard archiving system, and less than 25% provide XML or HTML formatted articles. I'll come back to some of this. I am here mostly talking about the 6 Plan S requirements that we could analyze based on DOAJ journal level metadata. So there are some requirements that I will not say anything about. And I will also only look at the DOAJ data, not at the survey data here. There are a lot of numbers that you can read. If you want the full menu, you will have to read the report. This is the very short version. I think we should note that most requirements are well aligned with good publishing practices. So these are requirements that journals should strive to meet, whether they want to be Plan S compliant or not. They want to be good publications. And we should also note that many requirements are neither costly nor really difficult to comply with. It is more a matter of aligning policies and practices with the requirements. And also, let us not forget that non-compliance is about technicalities. It's not about the content, and in no way shows lack of scholarly quality. This is about technicalities of publishing and dissemination, which is of course important also for a diamond journals. If we look at the list of requirements, the 6 that we can look upon. Licenses, there is no cost associated with compliance with licenses. A journal might allow authors to choose between a number of licenses. From the DOAJ journal data, we only get the most restrictive license. That means that the realities could be slightly better than the table here shows. Peer review doesn't seem to be a problem at all for diamond journals. They are all compliant as far as we could find, except for one journal where we don't have information. Author copyright is a requirement that the author can retain copyright. There's no cost associated with this, but it's about aligning the journal's expressed policies with good practices. Probably most journals are compliant, they just don't say they are compliant. Article permanent identification, the DOIs, this involves cost, and we need funders and journal owners to look into how this could be financed. Permanent preservation is also something that could involve costs. But there are also a number of free solutions available for many journals, and more are in the coming. So there is really no reason that only 20% of diamond journals should be compliant on this point. And again, machine readable licenses, there's no cost. It's a technicality that needs to be worked into the published version of the article. So while the numbers aren't really impressive, the obstacles aren't really impressive either. If we go more into detail about license types, and I see there's questions about that. Nearly half of diamond journals comply with Planet's requirements, which is either the CC BY, the CC 0, or the CC BY share alike. It is the CC BY that is the important license here in terms of numbers. And the major obstacle to compliance is the use of the non-commercial clause. Though there is also some use of the no derivatives clause, which isn't compliant either. It is technically very easy to comply with the Planet's license requirements. It's a matter of changing policies and implementing them. The challenge is to understand the licenses and how they actually align with what one wants to achieve through them. And to me, it's a paradox. It is the APC-based, often for-profit publishers that allows the most liberal reuse of the content. Why is this so? I mean, the liberal reuse makes science tick faster and better. What I would say the major problem is not a requirement, it is a recommendation. The full text in a machine-readable community standard format, such as JATS XML. There is some uncertainty as to what such as JATS XML means. So we have chosen to analyze this as if HTML is compliant. We don't know that whether that is correct. The most common full text format is the PDF. Around 99% of all journals offer the PDF as a full text format, but that is not Planet's compliant. Among open access diamond journals, XML is offered by 8.2%, HTML by 22.9%, while among APC-based journals, XML is offered by 20% and HTML by 60%, roughly. And XML is something that will cost, either in terms of resource use and/or expenses to buy as a service. HTML will also need resources or money, but it's less complicated and less expensive. So this is something that needs to be looked further into. We have spent some time on this because Coalition S has said that what is today strong recommendations could very well in a few years' time become requirements. So what recommendations do we have? Well, raise awareness and understanding of open licenses and promote policy implementation. Facilitate access to DOIs, especially for smaller journals. Stimulate and enable journals to preserve content. Encourage self-archiving policy registration, I haven't mentioned that. And improve access to formatting tools and services. That is about enabling journals to meet the XML, HTML requirements. I think I'll stop there and try to answer the questions. Agatha, should I stop sharing?
Yes, please, Jan-Erik.
Thank you.
We'll save the questions for the end, but I am going to hand over to Agatha to run the polls that I forgot about after Pierre Carl was speaking. So Agatha, if you want to do that now, please.
Completely fine. So we have a poll of 3 questions, which actually refer to the part that was covered by Pierre Carl, which was about the technical support. So I'm going to launch the poll now. You should be able to see it there. You will see that you have 3 questions. First one, what publishing softwares does your journal use? The second one, who manages the technical infrastructure? And finally, are you satisfied with the publishing workflow? These questions are for those who are journal editors or journal owners. So I will keep it on for another 30 seconds, and then we'll share the results for you, Claire, to comment on. And then I will also launch the poll for Jan-Erik's part. Okay. All right. I can see that we have about 87 people who voted. Okay, I'm ending the poll. And Claire, over to you with the results.
Yeah, so it's actually once again the domination of academic CMS.
There was a question about the previous poll about how big the sample size was. So Agatha's obviously said that it was 7 people voted this time, but there are, I realize you can't see as a participant how many people are here. So there's 271 people in the webinar at the moment. So looking at the questions here, overwhelmingly, the majority is for an academic CMS, 65% using one of these, 10% a more generic CMS, 14% a custom system, 11% other. For a slight majority, an academic institution, 34% is managing the technical infrastructure. Next is the editors of the journal, 30%, national platform, 15%, an international platform, 5%, and 15% other. And most people very satisfied with their publishing workflow, which is great. So 80% saying yes, there that they are. Fantastic. Agatha, so if you could run the next one, please.
Yes. So now for the next poll, and this one has to do with Jan Erik's part about compliance. I am launching it as I speak. You will see that you have 2 questions. Which standard seems the hardest to meet in the future? And then which requirement would you see as a first priority to comply with? And you have several choices there. So please do start voting. I will keep it open for another 30 seconds. Okay, I will proceed to ending the poll. We have 105 people who voted, and I'm sharing the results, Claire, for you here.
Thank you. Okay, so permanent preservation has come out top on this with 35% as the standard that seems the hardest to meet in the future. That's interesting because I know DOAJ is helping with that at the moment. Full text formats being a close second at 34%. And which requirement would you see as a first priority to comply with? Author copyright has come out top there, 23%. DOIs, 21%. It's all very familiar from our OASPA members. And permanent preservation coming out third there, 17%. Thank you, Agatha. So next we have Pierre Mounier, who's going to talk about the effectiveness part of the study. Over to you, Pierre.
Thank you, Claire. So I'm going to share my screen again. Here we go. So as my colleagues, I'll try to sum up in one slide the main takeaways from our study and from the findings of the study on this section and topic about effectiveness. So just a few ideas. It appears from the study that first, you remember that, for example, in the online survey, we asked some questions about the financial situation of the journals, and we received a lot of answers which were "I don't know." In fact, when we asked precise questions about the type of cost or the amount of costs or the financial situation more largely of the journal, so we understand that there is a general lack of knowledge in the journal team, editorial teams, about their own financial situation of the journal and about the type of costs. One of the major findings coming from the study also is to identify that most of the journals depend a lot on volunteering on one side and on in-kind contribution on the other side. But it was quite a let's say, a major finding to find that volunteering. And we specified that when we talk about volunteering, we talk about volunteering in editorial tasks, not scientific tasks, such as editing, copy editing, typesetting, and so on. And there is a lot of volunteering to support this kind of activity for the Diamond journals. When we asked questions about the type of funding of models Diamond journals rely on, we see that there is a wide diversity of funding models, but usually each journal rely on one funding stream, one narrow funding stream, and not on a diversity of funding streams. So there is some sort of discrepancy here, where globally there is a wide diversity of potential models to fund Diamond journals, but for each journal they depend usually on one or two funding streams. And I'll try to talk to you about that later on. In some questions we asked in the online survey, a lot of journals told us that there was a strong need to be able to rely more on shared services and platforms. So there is a strong need in this from the Diamond journals to rely on shared services. And also we found by several means that globally there is a lack of coordination or lack of communication amongst journals themselves who don't share enough their knowledge, their know-how, or information, or share solutions amongst them to streamline, in fact, their collaborative work. Okay, so now in the next few slides, I'll try to talk to you about our recommendations. So recommendations we propose to the community, to different stakeholders in the community, to support Diamond journals regarding effectiveness. So there is the first recommendation, which is to further, for institutions and scholarly societies more particularly, to further develop partnerships with the goal to help raise funds and seek out efficiencies. There is a recommendation to consider using more shared services infrastructure. There is another recommendation to reflect on the mid to long-term role of volunteers and the in-kind contributions in running journals. There is one about the possibility to diversify journals' funding streams. There is a fifth recommendation about aiming to consistently manage formal journal budgets. And of course, the last recommendation in this section is to register OA Diamond journals in the OAJ. So I'll go back to each of these recommendations, saying a few words about each of them, as of course as an explanation, but also as a means to open the conversation in the community about the relevance of this type of recommendation and how they can be implemented if they are useful and relevant. Let's start with the first recommendation, which is for societies and institutions more particularly to further develop partnerships. So we think that there is not enough coordination and communication across borders, across institutions, and across societies to talk together about their common challenges and the potential solutions that could be found together to ensure better sustainability of their own Diamond journals globally. So we recommend to institutions and societies to better coordinate, to think strategically, to find shared solutions or shared tools or shared funding models that could support better Diamond journals, but also to build communities. So at the very beginning of this presentation, you remember Jeroen telling you that we found that, or maybe it was Johan, I don't remember, but telling you that we found that those 29 something Diamond journals were not yet a community. And we're more talking about an archipelago, so a collection of journals who are not forming yet a community being able to talk with one voice, to share important things together, and to coordinate better. So our recommendation is for more particularly the institutions and the scholarly societies to build communities of diamond journals, gathering them around, it can be around inside, of course, national boundaries, but it can be inside linguistic areas, or of course, by discipline, so that they can share expertise, knowledge, and best practice together. That's very important because we are not yet there with this type of journals. The second recommendation is to use more shared infrastructures and services. So I put there a list of examples of those shared infrastructures and services that serve the diamond journals, more particularly for managing the production workflow or the peer reviewing, hosting, and disseminating the journals. Some of those infrastructures and services are based on a national scope, or international scope, regional scope, or discipline scope. So those are very important resources that should be more used, we think, by diamond journals, but that should be also more open and being more supported, in fact, or better supported, to be able to include and to support more journals than they do currently. The third recommendation is to reflect, more particularly for the journal teams, to reflect on the role of volunteers and in-kind contribution in the way they are managed. To put it in a word, we could say that volunteering and in-kind can be considered, and it appeared a lot when we analyzed the full text answers coming from our online survey, because we had very contradictory ideas there, or opinions there, where volunteering and in-kind can be considered as a strength on one side, okay, because then you don't depend on a cash flow to have this human resource to run the journal. But of course, it's a weakness on the other side, because of course it depends a lot of goodwill and informal agreements inside institutions, for example, that can disappear from one day to another. So a strength and a weakness at the same time. So the question we would like to be debated and maybe to be considered by a journal editorial team would be how to reward better both, and more particularly volunteering. How to reward better volunteering to be able to secure longer term commitment from those two types of resources. So this is the kind of debate, discussion, and probably adoption of better practice we would like to see in the community, because we think this is really important for the future of and the sustainability of diamond journals more particularly. The fourth recommendation is to diversify journal funding streams. So I said that on one side there is a huge diversity of funding models available. That's something that appeared very clearly from the survey we made, where we collected a lot of funding models available to support diamond publishing. But a lot of those journals are in fact relying on one single source of funding. And we think that for those journals to rely on one single source of funding can be a threat to the journal sustainability, because of course, when you rely on one source, if the source disappears, then there is a danger for the journal itself. So of course, a good practice in terms of running an organization or running a journal is to try to diversify the funding streams or the resource streams, so that if one disappears, then you can rely on the other ones, and there is a stability in that. But of course, if the journals they diversify too much their funding streams, it becomes very difficult to manage, and it can be a burden just to manage the economic model of the journal. So we think that there should be a balance and a good combination that should be searched by journals to establish their financial stability or their management stability. I just want to go to the fifth one, which is to aim to consistently manage budgets. Vanessa Proudman will go more into detail about that, but we found from the answers coming from the online survey that a lot of journals where I already said that they didn't know what were their costs exactly. They were unable to calculate their costs. They didn't have a clear idea about their annual budget and how it was going on or evolving in the time from year to year. And so we think that there is a work to do for them, and to be able to rely more on tools to be able to have a clearer representation of their financial situation. So you already know that in terms of price and not cost transparency, there are already two frameworks that have been released in the community and which are used by Coalition S more particularly. I know this is not for the cost structuration. I know this is for price structuration, mainly for APC-based journals. But what is interesting for me here is the attempt to formalize, in fact, the types of budget lines and in a way which is simple enough to be used by small journals and by editorial teams or by small teams running journals. So this is it could be a good also indication or a good help, this kind of tool, to help diamond journals to have a better, let's say, structuration of their budget and a better representation of where they are in terms of financial stability. And finally, I had, sorry, this one, yes. The final recommendation in this section seems obvious, okay? So please register in the DOAJ. But of course, you saw that it's and Pierre-Carl, you said that it's not so obvious for many journals because many diamond journals are not registered yet in the DOAJ. So we really think that there is a common effort to be done from both sides, or from many sides, in fact, to have more diamond journals registered in the DOAJ. And I just put on my slide not only the logo of the DOAJ, but you know, this inventory of diamond journals crowdsourced that Bianca and Jeroen set up at the beginning of our study, that collected a long list of journals. And I just want to thank many of you who added titles in this crowdsourced list, and more particularly some of you who added a lot of titles. But here we have identified a lot of good journals or interesting diamond journals which are not yet registered in DOAJ. So there is an important effort to do at this point. And I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pierre. So now we have another poll, Agatha.
Yes, we do have another poll, and we've been informed that apparently, unfortunately, attendees cannot see these polls, which was definitely not our what we had in mind. So I will do my best to then share the results with you. I will just take screenshots, and I will present. Perhaps at the end we can have one slide with all the results. So the next poll is about Pierre's part, so it's about effectiveness. I am launching it right now, so you should be able to see it. You will see that we have two questions for you. The first one is, if your journal is not yet registered in the DOAJ, could you explain why? And then the second one, volunteering is critical for many to support editorial and technical workflows. How do you think volunteering should be rewarded? So two questions for you. Of course, these are also for those who are editors or editor owners or journal owners. 30 more seconds. And let's see how how this goes. And then I will share my results as I was doing with the previous polls, but I understand that not everyone could see them. But let me run the poll for a little bit longer. Okay, and I am about to end the poll.
Agatha, I could share my screen so that people can see the results.
Yes, that would be absolutely fantastic. We have 74 people who voted, and I am now sharing my results. So Claire, at least you should be able to see them.
I can see them, and I will read them all out just in case. So if your journal is not yet registered in DOAJ, could you explain why? Other has got the highest amount, and it may be looking at the chat that journals are already registered in the DOAJ, and that's why they picked that. So that was 68%. We have 16% saying our journal doesn't meet the criteria. 5% our journal has applied but was rejected. 4% we were listed before the 2015 update and we haven't reapplied since then. 4% also I don't know DOAJ, and 3% being registered does not justify the effort. And then for the other question about volunteering, volunteering is critical for many to support editorial and technical workflows. How do you think volunteering should be rewarded? Overwhelming majority have selected compensation in terms of career advancement, so that's 54%. 24% selected in-kind compensation such as access to training and other non-monetary resources. 14% monetary compensation, and 8% selected other. Great, okay, thank you all for taking part in these. So the final presentation we have now is Vanessa Proudman, who is going to talk about capacity building and sustainability. Over to you, Vanessa.
Just one second. Yes, so thank you very much for the introduction. So we've been hearing my colleagues talking about how there are thousands of small journals carrying out similar activities. And many of those journals, we've also heard reported that there are common challenges, be them on technical requirements, workflows, accounting issues, marketing, IP, copyright, and above all preservation. So we really see that there are some real issues there. And there's also a lack of awareness of OA Diamond and funding OA Diamond. So we really need to build our capacity, so our know-how, the people behind these journals, for us to transition to a more connected and collaborative, resilient Diamond and alternative publishing system led by scholars. So if we really want this as our future, it's really important that we build on the know-how, the capacity, in some of those areas that I mentioned and that we've uncovered in the study, and also look at how can we financially sustain OA Diamond going forward, and not just the OA Diamond of now, but also the ones that will appear into the future, and those communities that come together so that they really thrive going forward. So I'm going to go straight into the recommendations. The first one, I think it's already been mentioned by a couple of people. We feel that there's a real importance to create an OA Diamond capacity centre, where funders, infrastructures, institutions and societies, all of those stakeholders can engage in building a centre, a community that really serves them to help them build the technical, editorial, financial, and administrative capacity that some of them need, to really help grow OA Diamond, strengthen that community. We have so many islands of journals. We really want to help bring them together, to mature them, to innovate, and also eventually to save costs for OA Diamond through collaboration. And that capacity center or centers, so as long as there's some kind of coordination where we're working on common goals together, would have two key components. A community of practice or practices, so in different languages, in different countries, regions, disciplines perhaps, and also a resource center also in different languages with toolkits, trainings, etc. What we feel is important is to create some strong lines of communication between the young journals and the more mature or the larger journals, the ones who already have a number of those technical requirements sussed, and that they can share that with those that have a lot less capacity available. So I also would like to stress, so I know the problem with the word center is that it sounds centralized. That's really not what we are planning to do. So we really want to ensure that independence and the branding, the individual branding of the journals remains, but it's where workflows can be improved upon, where the challenges that are common can be addressed together, where we collaborate, yeah? And that's also not creating a brand new community per se, but also linking up with existing ones. And there have been more recently in the making. So connecting all of those with new ones, where it makes sense to solve issues and also to advocate for the promise in OA Diamond, for example, going forward. It's about sharing expertise, which Pierre was also saying, discussing the common issues, the solutions that some of us have, raising awareness, I said, also about collaborating on joint projects. So we know that grants are important, but grants should really be to develop and not sustain operations, in my view. So collaborating on joint projects like shared services and infrastructure, and joining up those dots, those islands, building those bridges between the islands through this capacity building. So that's kind of the main recommendation really in this section. And to do that, so this is actually the first step. It's to organize a number of workshops to prepare that capacity center. So we are kind of testing out some of our recommendations here already, and also, of course, presenting the capacity center idea here. But we're also planning to organize an international symposium on that with all of the different stakeholders later on, after we've had some specific workshops around some of the topics you've heard about today, if you're interested. And then the third one, it's also, so if we are learning about or gaining new capacity through these networks, it could also be that you might just actually want to hire in somebody to help you with your copy editing, with indexing your journal or marketing. And you'd like to have a space where you can find fair, reliable, and high quality service providers. So that's our idea. JISC has such a place, and there are others. So where could excellent service providers, and there are a number of us in the room I know today, could offer their wares in a trustworthy place for OA Diamond. So now, but going to financial sustainability, and let me follow on from my colleagues, looking at some of the main takeaways. If we're thinking about financially sustaining OA Diamond going forward, we see that there's a huge investment being made by research performing organizations, universities, libraries, but governments, national governments as well. But to keep OA free, how do they do it? Yes. How do the OA Diamond journals do it? Well, over 60% are running their journals on less than 10,000 euros. Of course, it's relative to their GDP, but we also see in countries of high GDP that many are also running on a low flame. So we also find that 70% of the OA diamonds in our survey sample run on also only 1 to 2 FTEs. And we heard from Pierre previously that there is a huge voluntary effort. So there's a reliance on the goodwill of volunteers. Partly it's the culture of the organization, but partly you might question, well, if those volunteers went away or passed away even, what would happen to that journal? So that's a kind of a bit of a risky situation that we're in. And we owe a lot to the institutions who are providing that in-kind contribution to supporting and sustaining OA Diamond. And just going to the financial situation, we asked a number of questions on the financial situation to understand that. And this is just a couple of those. We also wanted to understand how healthy some of those journals were. 40% reported that they were breaking even, but 25% operate at a loss. And we had another high number who weren't aware. They couldn't also tell us, as Pierre already said, what their costs were, whether they were making a loss or whether they were making a profit or even breaking even. So I think the lack of knowledge on the financial situation is a challenge going forward, because if you want to economize, or if you want to see what are the posts that are costing you most, or where could you collaborate more, having more information on that is really very valuable. So the recommendations going forward is, I'll go through very quickly. The first one is that funders, so the wide range of funders, develop a national and international funding strategy for the next 5 years. So that's not just Coalition S, but it's actually also governments, on national levels, international levels, institutional levels, to really think about a strategy for funding, not just an ad hoc or as a piece of goodwill because you've heard about the OA Diamond study, but more consistently looking at funding operations and development. So there's often grant funding, but what about operations? That's key. And in this strategy, we'd need to have guidance to funders on what, as according to which principles should we be funding OA Diamond, and defining some of those selection criteria, advising on how to fund what, and as I say, beyond grants, and building on a range of existing mechanisms and new ones. And a follow-up study is looking a lot more in detail at that. I'll mention that briefly later. The second one is looking at more consistently financing operations. So as I said, universities, by and large, national government agencies, publishers, learning societies have been the largest funders, and it's so important that they continue to commit to OA Diamond. But still, the support falls short of some of the current needs for some. So they need to continue it, and more consistently on an annual basis. And RFOs have been lacking in this space so far, but it's great. We've heard from Johan, Coalition S is really seriously looking at how can they help fund OA Diamond. So we're really excited about that. And libraries, of course, many of those have also been collectively funding or funding in kind by managing some of those journals. So it's important that that continues. Following funding strategy to avoid the ad hoc funding of the goodwill. So again, continue with that strategically. Funding those who deliver on quality. So we're not saying fund everything, but that they should comply with quality criteria, for example, in DOAJ, for staff, payables, for editing, for things like editing or copy editing, DOIs, other things, and for shared services and infrastructure. And then the last one, investing in the future. So it's really important that we also invest in the future of OA Diamond. So to create that more resilient, interconnected and thriving community, this OA publishing system. That means aside from importantly investing in operations, invest in the development of that. So helping those journals meet industry standards that we've heard about today from Jan Erik, for example, and develop shared services or infrastructure that Pierre has told us about that benefit many, right? Because there are so many, but how can we bring those resources and serve many in one go with some excellent services here? And through that, I think we'll really increase the visibility and quality of OA Diamond. And by so doing, we can really help provide a viable alternative to the current system, supporting diversity and encouraging academic independence and innovation. So I think, yes, I'm going to end there. I'm sure there are lots of questions. There is a lot of data, so I'm not sure whether I have them all in my head, but let's have a go.
Thank you, Vanessa. I think we have one more poll.
Oh, yes.
Before we get to
the poll.
We do have one more poll for Vanessa's question section, and then after the poll, we actually have 2 additional questions that we will drop this time in the Q&A, and we would ask you to answer the questions that we will drop them. But let me start with the poll first. So here it is, the poll for capacity building and sustainability. I am launching it. There is only one question. So we are curious. Does your organization invest in OA Diamond beyond your own journal? So I will run this one for a bit longer. And by the way, by now I took screenshots of all the poll results and I am putting them in our slideshow. So they will be available there at the end. Okay. I think we'll end it now. And Claire, over to you for this one.
Thanks, Agatha. Just waiting for it to come up. Okay. Most said not yet, 37%, although it's about equal, really. 33% yes, and 29% not applicable.
Exactly, and we have 2 more questions that Bianca hopefully kindly will put in our Q&A section now. So the first question here is, if your organization invests in OA Diamond beyond your own journal, please explain how. So these are more of open questions, that's why we wanted to put them in Q&A. And the second question is, what would be the most essential action to have a more sustainable diamond ecosystem? So Bianca hopefully is putting these questions in our Q&A now, and we encourage you to answer. Over to you, Claire.
Thank you. So yeah, we will, Agatha will put those poll screenshots into the slides, and we will also share the answers to the written questions as well. We'll figure out a way of doing that and sharing those with you too. We have about 10 to 15 minutes for questions, and I'm going to ask the panelists to help me out here, because I'll start you off with one, but there are a lot, so please do look through, and some of them are comments as well, which also are mixed in with the questions. And also do have a look at the answered questions if there's any of those that you want to add to or answer verbally. So the first one I'm going to ask is, and anybody can take this, in the report and the initial summary, European diamond journals are summed up as having a 45% share compared to Latin America with a 25% share. However, it seems like Eastern and Western European journals are quite different. Can you please describe the morphology of the Western Europe diamond journals and their link with university support and management? Can anybody answer that?
That is an exciting but difficult to answer question. We of course indeed had that split between Eastern and Western Europe. that was based, by the way, on data from Walt Crawford, who is constantly mapping the landscape of full open access journals. But what we didn't do is continue that split between Eastern and Western Europe for all the other questions. So that is in the data. So if you go into the survey data we shared, we could do additional types of analyses, really looking at this separation between Eastern and Western Europe. But I would be hard pressed to really come up with additional morphology where Western European journals would be different from Eastern European ones. We just didn't look into that.
However, it is exactly these kind of questions that that are very interesting for us as well, because with so many parameters, there are all kinds of combinations and breakdowns to make, and we couldn't do them. But these kind of questions do spur on that, so we might actually look into that and then add that, share that analysis later on.
And personally, I don't really like the split between the East and West, and then where is that split? And not all those in Eastern Europe have the same history, investment, priorities with OA, for example. So I find it not always so helpful. But if you'd like to have some more information on between certain countries, we could probably do that. Yes. I know there was a question specifically to the funding that was mentioned earlier, which maybe other people might be interested in answering. I saved it, Claire, from earlier. It was about what other funding mechanisms are Diamond journals using to fund their journals, and who are they funded by? So I have got data on that, and I thought maybe I could share it. Shall I answer that question? Because I think maybe other people would be interested. So we mentioned the in-kind support. So if we're looking at the funding mechanisms for many journals, what comes up top is certainly in-kind support by the home institution. So that matches with the investment by the research performing organizations, and voluntary labor as well, which excludes scientific peer review. But we then had as number 3 grant funding. And if you're actually looking at funding the operations, it's a bit worrying if you're using grant funding for that, because that's, you know, not what it's about, but obviously it's to fill a gap. We do have as number 4, we've got collectively organized funding. That is a broad term because there are different ways of doing that. But then we've got things like donations or gifts, membership fees, that's probably for some of those platforms. Oh, brilliant. Thank you very much. Was that Bianca? Thank you.
I'm sharing that now for a moment.
Oh, that's great. Look at that.
Continue.
Yes. Some of them have, so far less, have things like commercial revenue or freemium content services, subscribe to open, and syndication hosting. So yeah, so that's a kind of the range that we've come across. We do have a deeper analysis of also all those others, and there were 400 of those, although a number of those actually we could put under in-kind and voluntary after all. But go into the report and delve in a bit deeper to look at some of those. I think there are some interesting findings, some things less surprising than others. But yes, so that can answer something on the funding side. Don't know whether there are any other questions related to funding or capacity building.
There's a question here. Do you think that existing institutional publication funds, I know this is a different kind of funds, for APCs could be extended to be useful for financial support of smaller OA journals?
Definitely. So I don't know whether we have somebody from the University of Amsterdam with us on the call. I know he planned to come. So there's a really interesting OA Diamond Fund where the University of Amsterdam, so of course they are committing financially to some of those larger deals with the legacy publishers. but they also want to invest in OA Diamond, and they have a fund for that, 100,000 euros per year.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Can we ask Pascal, because Pascal is
Oh,
here?
is
so
he?
can we ask him to,
that would be great.
Agatha, can you make him panelist for a second so we can ask him to perhaps...
He can say it much better than I can, yes. But that's a really nice example of how, yes, tell us more, Pascal, before I do it. Are you willing to?
I think that I promoted Pascal.
Pascal, are you happy to speak? Are you happy to answer that question, or?
It's coming, it takes time.
Yes.
Hi.
Hey, nice to have you with us.
Yeah. Sorry for putting you on the spot like this, but...
Oh, no, it's okay. Yeah, we have a fund, and that's actually divided in two routes. One route is that we donate to diamond journals where our researchers have published in, and it's complicated because what we do is that we, based on our input in Pure, identify diamond publications in diamond journals, and we use the DOIA for it, and have a criteria of DOIA registered and carrying a CC BY license, and then non-APC journal. And that's, yeah, we have to set a formal criteria to match this, but then what we do is we donate 500 euros per publication to these journals. That's the route one. And route two is it's an open fund, and it's actually meant for UVA initiatives. So diamond initiatives that have an affiliation with the UVA. That's also a difficult criteria, but and they can ask us for a donation by an appliance. So that's what we have now. So and it's for 5 years. So we will be donating 5 years from route one, and have each year a new round for funding for initiatives that are UVA affiliated. So yeah, that's I can talk an hour about all the complications when you have this fund, but this is what we do now. Yeah.
So thank you so much. So Pascal and I were talking about this, and we got into the discussion also about, wouldn't it be interesting if every institution could actually look at where their authors are publishing in which OA Diamond journals, and then make that contribution based on where their authors publish, or where their institutions are publishing a journal or are connected. So if we all paid our way a little bit as institutions or as funders, nations, you know, we could go a long way. And as we see, you know, OA Diamond journals, they don't need much to fund their operations. Yeah. So I think there are lots of I think something we didn't mention. I'll mention that in a follow-up slide, but we have a colleague from our team is going to do some really in-depth studies into current funding models that OA Diamond journals are using, but also models that funders are using, like Pascal's. So to explore the different opportunities, and then to explore new scenarios about which funding models might work then in practice in the future. Yeah, so that's also part of this going forward. And that's where we really want to highlight some of those concrete, exciting new initiatives, because we need to have a pool and a selection of different funding mechanisms that work for different types of funders.
Yeah.
May I ask a question to Pascal more particularly? And just to tell also that the colleague who is going to do the follow-up study is currently answering a lot of questions in the Q&A panel. His name is Didier Torny. So thank you, Didier, for that, and congratulations. And that will be a very exciting follow-up study, because it will go into concrete details about how to fund concretely the journals. Pascal, I'd like to ask you, if I may, a question, because I understand that from your OA Diamond Fund, you contact chief editors of journals who have asked, who didn't ask anything, in fact, where you said, okay, we have identified that you have published so many articles from our faculty members, so it means that you are eligible to receive funding from us based on that. Have you experienced, have you experienced difficulties with journals who can say, but we are unable to handle this money, for example. We are unable to receive the money. We don't know what to do with it because we are running on a different type of management, you know. So what have you experienced this type of difficulty? Because this is really interesting for us.
Not yet. So what I asked them is to send, it's to send us an invoice. It's not called an invoice because it's a non-deductible donation. You can name it what you like, but what they do is they send us an invoice for the amount of money that I want to donate them through an email address, and then we. So there has to be a kind of system that they can, or they need a bank account. I think that's the main thing. Yeah. But we thought of this fund, and as we go along, we find a lot of we have a lot of fundamental questions around Diamond Open Access, and if this is the correct way. But also, because what we do is we do this based on the registrations in our CRIS. So it could be that there are more publications than there are registered in our CRIS from a journal. We do this based on a registry in the Directive Open Access Journals, because we have to make an easy match, of course, because I cannot crawl 15,000 Diamond journals to see if a UVA researcher has published there. So we need a system. And we have an open access policy at the UVA, and that's that you have to publish open access if you do it with a license, with a CC BY license, preferably. So I made a selection on CC BY. And then again, you have to trust on the accurability of the information in a Directive Open Access journal. So, and that's not always correct, I can say, from experience. And then you have to write to the several journals and find out where to email to. But then again, a system where you ask journals to send us an invoice based on publications from UVA researchers in their journals, then you get, I don't know how many applications, and then you have to check it all, if it's correct, if it's not correct, and so on and so on. So it's very complicated to find a mechanism that works. So now we formally have our CRIS with registered publications. We have the DOAA with non-APC journals, CC BY, and the ISSNs. We match them, then we find the journals and the amount of publications, and we have so much money, and we divide it and we donate it. And next year we do the same round, and next year we do the same round. So in this case, we encourage journals to register in the Directive Open Access journals. We encourage our researchers to register their output. So that's I think two wins. And they can use the money to continue their publishing activities, to professionalize, and so on. And what Vanessa is suggesting, that if all institutions follow their researchers and donate to the outlets where they publish the Diamond journals, then it could be sustainable, I think. But it's a kind of a pay to publish model. Do we want? Yeah. So that's of course where we're going to then. So can you do this centralized? I think there are better ways than how we do it now. We were also thinking about OA switchboard. Can there be a role, for example, in combination? and you don't want to touch the APC thing, so that's also complicated. So there is a lot to it. But we are going to donate the next couple of years a lot of money to the journals, so I think that's helpful. Yeah.
Thank you, Pascal.
You're welcome.
For being dragged up here without any notice, so thank you very much.
Yeah.
So I have a question here. We're getting short on time, so I don't think we can do many more, but this question says that many Diamond open access journals are acting as a focus point for sustaining a scholarly community, and access to infrastructure and technical support is likely to undermine that. But the commercialization or monetization of services provided might undermine the community component of the production processes. So the question is wondering if there was any insight into that as part of the survey and study. And I did see another question about the upcoming Elsevier conference, but I can't find it. But it was asking what the panelists think about commercial services, really, so perhaps related. Vanessa, you're on mute. I can see that you're speaking.
Can you repeat the first question again? Because it was a long one.
Yeah, sorry, it was long. And I've annoyingly scrolled down looking for the other question. Hold on. I think it was saying that the Diamond Journal is a community, is a focus point for a community, and could commercial services undermine the community aspect of the production of the journal? Pierre, are you going to answer that?
I can provide my point of view. In fact, it's a personal answer. It doesn't come from any of the findings coming from the study. It's more a perspective and a standpoint, I would say. So from my point of view, there is no contradiction between commercial service provision on one side and community-driven activity, publication activity on the other side, as long as there is a clear distinction between commercial service provision and community governance. So the key question is the question of the governance. So it's perfect for me. It's perfectly good that we have commercial service providers providing good, technically good services to journals and maybe to public infrastructures, as long as the journals are self-governed or governed by the community, as long as the infrastructures are governed by the community, and that the research itself stays in control and has the control. Where there is a danger is when the commercial service providers go into control of the scholarly communication activity itself. But I think there is a real opportunity to work hand in hand with the community on one side, with the commercial service providers on the other side, as long as there is a clear line of division of responsibility and everyone is in a good position.
Thank you, Pierre. So before we finish, do any of the panelists, have any of you seen a question that you have a burning desire to answer before we close?
Jan Erik has his hand up.
Jan Erik.
Just a comment on Pierre here is that we don't have to go that many decades back in time before we were in a situation where the commercial entities were service providers and not owners of the content, which they are today. So I think commercial entities is not a problem. It's their ownership of content or the control over content that is the problem. So we shouldn't say that commercial entities is bad in itself. It was the world we lived in just a generation and a half ago. And I think it was a much better world. We saw in the DOAJ data that there are some major publishers that act as publishers for hire for for instance, some society journals. So there are some 100 diamond OA journals published by commercial entities. So that is a model that is in use already.
Thank you, Jan-Erik. So with that, I'm going to hand back to Vanessa as Executive Director of Spark Europe and host of this session to talk about the vision and work for the future and wrap things up. Vanessa.
Sorry, I'm now unmuted. Thank you very much. So this wonderful picture, this is not at the moment yet what the OA diamond ecosystem looks like. Here we have a really thriving ecosystem. We've got different patches, we've got pasture land, we've got forests, we've got water, we've got just like we do, very different domains, disciplines, journals, communities, thriving, working well together. They're also here you can see there are roads. They know where to get the resources, to get the water that they need from the reservoirs. This is what we need to work towards to build that ecosystem. And so that's in our conclusions. We want to create that diverse and thriving, innovative and more interconnected and collaborative OA Diamond Journal ecosystem that supports bibliodiversity and serves many languages, cultures and domains. And we kind of call that the OA Commons. So it's trying to link up that fragmented landscape, building a community, really strengthening the offering of OA Diamond. As I said earlier, also maintaining the diversity is really important in branding and the topic and the language, but the underlying work processes and services can be better streamlined, I think, and shared. It really also needs to be community governed. We were just talking about the importance of governance. So we see OA Diamond in this community. It's really important that this is, it's scholar led, that it's community governed and led going forward. And that the OA Diamond journals, we hope that they're motivated to connect and collaborate for their own needs, to solve some of the issues, to save costs, but also for the greater good of open research. And we also want those communities that work together with us on the Capacity Centre and on this vision to say how this OA Commons should be governed and developed and maintained. So that's why we, going forward, we're looking forward to doing some more workshops. But before I tell you about that, the proof of the pudding is certainly going to be in the eating. So we have today, we think we have some ingredients and we do have some recipes, but we want to find the great recipe with you for that OA Commons, for that OA Diamond community really to thrive, for us to build that together. And for that, it's really important for us to meet you at these kind of events. This is the start of a series of webinars and workshops around a number of themes. We'll be having a larger event on the OA Diamond Capacity Centre with all sorts of stakeholders later on, I think I mentioned earlier. And do really look forward to this in-depth study led by Didier, who's answering all the questions behind the scenes, looking at funding models and mechanisms that work now for both journals and funders, and developing new ones for the future. So those are our next steps. And we're also really looking to see how can we implement some of these recommendations with your help. And if you really have doubts about some of these, we haven't heard so many doubts, but we really want to hear from you because these need to really work. Yeah. So please do reach out to us. And I think I'm there. So we look forward very much to sharing the video of the event with you. Agatha will do that. She'll reach out to you. I would really love to thank Agatha for holding the fort and running everything today, went so smoothly, and for all those interactive polls. I'd like to thank all of the speakers who came, and Claire for charmingly chairing the session today, very much. For all your participation, all your questions, and collaboration. We look forward to more in the future. Agatha has a hand. I've probably forgotten something, have I? Yes. What is it?
Just that we had our last question that Bianca is going to drop in our Q&A, which is
I knew we had another question or a poll.
about the future, which is about the future. So I think that Bianca is about to drop the question there. We are really curious. So we wanted to ask you, if we were to host any future events, what topics would you like to address more in depth? So this question will now be dropped in Q&A, and please do answer, because we're very much looking forward to your answers. Sorry, Vanessa.
No, I apologize for forgetting. So we will be sharing some of this with you, as I say, the video and some of the answers to the many questions. And we will also thank you for answering some of our questions in the Q&A as well, to find out more about your situations. We'll be relaying that back to you. So thank you so much again for coming, everybody. And it's been a real pleasure. And thank you that Spark Europe was able to host the first one. Looking forward to the next ones. I know my colleagues are looking forward to doing some more in the coming months. So look out for those. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I will end the meeting now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.